Hello, welcome to our webinar. So this time we're definitely going to have the webinar. It's our second attempt after technical difficulties last week, for which we apologize. It's definitely software overload with so many people doing webinars and remote working, and unfortunately GoToWebinar was a victim of this load. Nonetheless, we're here today. Rick, that was supposed to be with us, had an emergency to attend to, so he won't be joining, but I have wonderful panelists, Kathy and Shay. So we will be diving today into a very broad topic around how fast scaling companies build and retain strong engineering teams, and of course we'll make it very relevant for where we are today as industry, as humankind. I'm Natalia, Codility CEO. Pleasure to meet everybody. A little bit of housekeeping. Please post your questions throughout the webinar in your control panel. We welcome all the questions all the time, and we'll be serving questions pretty much a little bit later to the panel. So please share whatever is on your mind, feedback, remarks, questions, and we'll go. Okay, without further ado, welcome Kathy and Shay. So maybe we can start by you sharing a little bit about yourself. What's your role? What's your company? And what typically actually before the COVID-19, which is the new reality to everybody, what were your biggest focuses with your company and your role, and what you're proud of the projects that you were recently running?
Great, I can start. I'm Shay. I'm a tech recruiter at Lever, and I hire for our San Francisco office. Lever is a tool that companies use to hire and scale their teams from pre to post hire. And my focus has been supporting our R&D team, so engineering, product, and design, and helping to not only scale the team, but be a resource to our product and sales teams as well as we work with our customers. In terms of what I'm proud of, we actually opened our first international office last year, and basically scaled that office from 0 to now 60 in a very short amount of time, and mostly virtually. So super relevant to kind of what we're gonna dive into later today, but was really fun to be able to essentially like kick up a new office in a new location.
My name is Kathy Mason. I'm the Senior University Recruiter at Okta. Okta, we enable any company to use any technology, but as I like to say, we make it easier to work. So 100% cloud-based, you're looking at single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, lifecycle management, everything we're all using right now. I hire all of the engineering talent. Previously, I hired all of the interns, got some help this year. But talk about scaling. This year we had about 6,000 applicants for 44 engineering internships. So big, proud user of Codility.
And I have to say that a lot of Codility customers are very happy customers of Okta and of Lever as well. So it all stays in the family and a very tightly knit ecosystem. So we touched a little bit about what fast scaling means. What was the shift for you pretty much overnight with the current situation and with coronavirus outbreak, lockdowns, remote work? How did this impact your scaling initiatives for these months?
So for us, yeah, it definitely was something that it happened so quickly in terms of like the change. We were still operating on our recruiting plan that we had created for this year up until about 3 2-3 weeks ago. And then as we were navigating the changes, advisories from CDC and whatnot, we've since paused hiring and are now looking at like which roles do we want to prioritize, and essentially kind of shifting our focus to both engaging like our existing employees and making sure that we're all set up for remote work and all of those things, but also looking at on the recruiting side, what initiatives and projects did we have slated on for later in the year that we could essentially bring forward to now.
And for Okta, with engineering interns, we had used virtual interviewing. We use Zoom quite a bit because it's very hard to fly, that many interns in for interviews. When we went to shelter in place in the Bay Area, when our offices closed, everyone worked virtually. It was pretty easy for all of us. Engineering in the past has always worked from home on Thursdays anyway. So that was an easy step. It was moving, I think the experienced hires to Zoom was the biggest change for us, and managing that message, managing the message for also our customers and all of our employees too.
And how, because I think we both you Shay at Lever and you Kathy at Okta, you were already experienced in both working and hiring remotely in a flexible way, right? So I'm imagining that you had a blend of both in-office process, a remote process for hiring. What would you advise to people who were forced to go remote overnight and they've never done that? How to even set that up? How to move an on-site process to a remote process?
Well, I think if you visit Okta, we've got some free tools for folks. So I'm going to put a plug in there because I know it is a scramble for many teams that aren't set up and don't, maybe they're using VPNs and, things are not, the security levels aren't where they should be. So do visit Okta because we've got some free tools if you haven't used it before, just to help people get through this crisis. I think a lot of it is making sure you've got transparency. So we've got blog posts that are updated by KJ, who is our Chief People Officer, letting the company know, letting clients know, letting potential employees know what our plan of action is. It's updated daily based on health and safety officers. So making sure you've got that transparency so folks know what's going on and what the company plan is.
Yeah, I think for us, kind of similar, we've written a couple blog posts in the past and republished some recently on remote work and tips for teams that have done none of that before. So kind of building things from scratch. For us, candidate experience is very high priority. Just being a hiring software company, the bar is already really high. So we really wanted to look at, okay, now that we're mapping our on-site process to, 100% remote, how can we make sure that all of those same touch points that were in the on-site are still included? So making sure the candidate still gets breaks, making sure that, okay, if we normally do a lunch, let's do a lunch over Zoom or a casual coffee chat, or making sure that it feels just as natural. So I tell folks map your process side by side to what you would normally have. To make sure that you're not missing anything.
Because I think it probably also it's very, very true for remote work, and we experience that with our team as well, which is it's very easy, I think, if we're going fully remote, to be super efficient and only focus on meetings back to back, right? Similarly, recruitment process, just interviews, very, 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 very dense with questions. But there's also this other part, which is more of a less structured part, right? Or cultural fit part, or how do you feel if this office, these people are the people that you want to work with? So I completely see a need to actually virtualize that aspect and be very deliberate about not losing that important component.
And I think having a very structured interview process is important. You know, who are doing the technical interviews? How long are the technical interviews? Who is doing, we call it culture add, who's doing the culture add interview, more of the behavioral questions, so that you can make sure when you do your huddles afterward, you've got a full picture of the, you know, of the candidate. There also, I think, especially right now, has to be a sell in your interviews. Anyone who's on that panel has to be able to talk about Okta, has to be able to talk about the culture, about what they love, all of those things, because in essence, you know, we have to wrap our arms around these candidates and make them feel welcome.
And I would imagine that in times of uncertainty, some candidates might actually decide to stay put, right, where they are. So even more so, transparency around financial stability of our companies, about the plans, about how we have already adapted to this world, how we're delivering value to our customers in this new world. I completely agree. I think this is something that can be very, very reassuring to candidates, more than ever, I would say.
I think you talked about that before, that you had seen, you know, some things with candidates, especially in the Bay Area, that, you know, especially in the beginning, that there was a little bit of pushback once we went to shelter in place.
Yeah, I think that any time where there is economic uncertainty, you know, people are going to be fearful. I mean, we're all in a place where we've never navigated a situation like this before, and I think there was definitely a shift in kind of the sentiment of applicants that started the process on site, and then, you know, as things change, like it's just a lot of things to navigate as a person. So I think it's important to have those conversations and make sure that people kind of know what's on the table, know their options. For some people, I would advise, if you're in an industry that's doing well right now as a result of this, maybe you don't make a change. But having those transparent conversations with people to just ease their concerns if they do have any, and if they have questions, you know, being able to answer them. If there are things that you don't know, being honest and saying, hey, we don't know where this is going, but you know, being really honest, I think, is, you know, the key to kind of navigating that, and just making sure that people have the resources that they need. At the end of the day, you know, we are kind of responsible for moving people through, you know, a process that is going to potentially change their day-to-day lives. So it's a big decision, and I think just kind of hearing them is really key for that.
And do you see any differences in the quality of your process when you go fully remote versus when you had the on-site? Or is it really more in our heads? Because I think on remote work per se, what a lot of places realize, hey, we can actually be as productive, or sometimes maybe even more productive than we worked in the office. So do you see a similar trend going fully remote with your hiring processes?
I think for us, it's been pretty smooth so far, because we have been doing virtual interviews for, you know, about a year now at Lever. So we've gotten pretty experienced in that. And I think we've also been using this time to fine tune as well, for the teams that maybe didn't have as many candidates in other locations, that were used to doing more on-sites. You know, how are they feeling about everything? But so far, so good for the most part.
And at Okta with interns, I think it was 4 years ago, we used to fly candidates in, but since then we've used solely Zoom. So it's business as usual, but the great part is, because we've been doing it so long, it made it very easy to roll out to our experienced hires.
I think what makes a difference too is just having really great collaboration tools. Like, you know, we've really been heavily leaning on Slack. We have a Zoom integration with Lever that's been a game changer, just in terms of like having a candidate, when they interview with us, they only receive one link. They stay in that Zoom interview the whole time. People are able to pop in and out. It makes it super seamless from a scheduling standpoint, and also from an interview logistics standpoint.
So pretty much we're in. I think we were talking with one of the previous panels that if that situation happened to us 10 years ago, the world would have so many more problems to cope, right? And we've built a very interesting infrastructure since then.
Totally.
I think too, having things like Code Live with Codility. There was another product we used to use, well, it remains nameless, which wasn't stable and would crash quite often during the interviews. But having something that is stable, that our engineers love to use, that's easy for our candidates, you know, where you're not having to download things, makes it a much easier process too.
And it's fantastic to hear. So we're actually, by the way, on our site for the last 2 weeks, our Code Life usage grew 300%.
Wow.
So we're in the so currently we're also putting all our attention to making sure that that actually we support our customers and with that solution. And a lot of our customers found out that they had a lot of on-site interviews scheduled, and they would lose the candidates if they don't move to virtual technical interviews. And we were really humbled to be able to support that. I'm very curious also around how many people are you onboarding virtually right now for Okta and Lever, or will, right? Because suddenly I think the move to remote virtual interviewing was probably a little bit an earlier move than onboarding everybody virtually. How are you navigating these processes?
We're 100% virtual onboarding orientation. It's business as usual. I know that our IT department ships out the laptops and all the required, you know, things that people need for work prior. I'm looking at what will a virtual internship look like. So that's a completely new area for me. So spending a lot of times in terms of programming with learning and development, you know, what's the proper amount of check-in for you know, a new intern. With our engineering department, every experienced hire has a mentor. Does the mentor check in every day? Does the manager check in every day? Because you've got to have, I think, much more support when you're onboarding someone who's virtual.
For us, it was an interesting time with the shelter in place and closing the office. Actually, that week, we had about 10 new starts that were onboarding. So they had their first week on site, and then since then, the remainder of their onboarding has been virtual. So for them, it was, I guess you got 25% on site, 75% virtual now. And we have had a couple new hires start in that time that have been 100% virtual. We have a pretty structured onboarding as well, similar to your team, Kathy. We have, you know, orientation that our learning and development and people team lead. Hiring managers are very involved. Different org leaders are very involved. So that first 2-3 weeks of a new hire's life cycle is already pretty packed. And we've kind of mapped all of that back to virtual. So it'll be interesting to see how things go. We usually do a 1-month check-in for new hires and kind of survey how things are going. So it'll be interesting to compare kind of those results to what we've seen before all of this.
And I'm imagining that supporting the new hires that are onboarding virtually is super important for all of us, because you would typically starting a new job is kind of stressful, right? We all want to do well, and there's so many new things to navigate, so many new things to learn, and all the while we're adapting to shelter in place. If we're parenting at the same time, we're adapting to shelter in place with kids at home, with a new place, right, to work at. So I think this is really a very fragile moment for everybody, and we're also trying to put a lot of attention to supporting our new hires.
I know for us, our learning and development team has set up learning paths through Udemy on how do you virtually manage a team, how should you be most productive as a virtual employee. So just asking all managers to take these, 15, 20, 30-minute classes just on what this world looks like, and as an employee, how we can be more productive too, I think is really important.
And I'm seeing that we're getting questions, so I'll serve some questions already. So one question that we're having is around a fully remote process, hiring process, and how it can work for individual contributors. So the person is imagining how it can work very well. How about management roles? How about team managers? How can you hire team managers? Can you hire managers virtually? And how do you test for that?
I think the process can be very similar. We have had actually a couple new managers that are onboarding virtually right now. And so I think it's a combination of, having a very structured onboarding plan from the beginning so the person knows what they're getting into, and also making sure that they have those touch points with their team members. To ensure that you're building that foundation of, manager and individual contributor relationship really early on, so that process can be seamless.
And I think also, within the hiring process, maybe a greater amount of time is given to behavioral questions in terms of tell me about a time when. Most skilled managers are prepared for, different things happening, would have something in their past where, their internet went down for 5 days and how they managed, and, just looking for that type of skill set, someone who can spin on a dime, someone who can think outside, what is the norm for cases like this.
Yeah, I think on our team, we're also very much an advocate for having the folks that are going to be managed by that person interview their said manager. So they're having that touch point beforehand. And also a very big fan of with references. When I'm doing references for somebody senior level, somebody who's going to be a manager, getting a reference from former direct reports to get insight, in real time, in real life of how was this person as a manager? How would you describe them? Do you still keep in touch? All of the things that you want to know about.
Thank you. This is super insightful. We also got a question around how did you navigate scaling your hiring process when you were scaling the company, because it's a different thing, right? How big was Okta and Lever when you joined, and how big are you now in terms of people?
I think we might have been close to 1,000, and we're definitely over 2,000 now. We have offices, let's see, Bellevue, San Jose, San Francisco, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Toronto, and then London, Paris, Munich, Amsterdam, Sweden, Australia, and then in the future, Japan. So it's interesting. How do you scale at that? How do you continue to keep the culture too? And I know that's been a big question for all of us. A big part is our all hands meeting every single solitary Friday. And it's led by one of our founders, either Todd or Freddie. It's a place to learn about products that are in beta. It is a place to have customers in so they talk about how they use the products. But I think most importantly, it's a time for all of us to ask questions. In fact, our all hands tomorrow, they've added an additional 15 minutes because we all have a lot of questions right now. How is everybody doing? What's our response to all of this? So it comes from the top, I think, in keeping that culture, especially if you're worldwide.
Wow, that's so many offices. We are not nearly on that level, but when I joined Lever, I think we were around 150, maybe a little bit below that, and now hovering between 260, 300, not quite at 300. So essentially doubled. We opened our Toronto office. We also have a good handful of folks that are remote and continuing to, go remote full time even before all of this craziness in different territories across the US. We also have a contractor team that is embedded within our engineering team in Bogota, Colombia. So we've been kind of navigating, scaling in like, how do we work well as a distributed team for a while? I think on the cultural side, it has been interesting. We still have a lot of Leveroo, cultural kind of things that we do. I think for us, it's just been making space for people to create community within the company. So we have hundreds of Slack channels, probably from everything to celebrity gossip, cutesy posts, people have pets. Now we're doing food from home because we don't have our free lunch at work. So just finding ways for people to connect. And I think that really starts, in the on-site interview process, and something that we really advocate for is allowing people to make those connections, both one-on-one and as a team.
I think another thing, Shay, that you reminded me, employee resource groups, I think, are so important. We call it Okta. It's women at Okta. We've got people of color at Okta. We've got Pride. So making sure that every office is involved in that. And we've got a great leader of diversity and inclusion, Madhvi, who's been instrumental in making sure that even, a smaller office or remote employees are involved in these things. Mm-hmm. We're going more and more to a dynamic workforce, meaning that, if you're an engineer, you don't necessarily have to be hired and work in San Francisco. If you're a great engineer, we want to have you on staff. So maybe you are in Texas somewhere. So again, getting Okta University up and going, so you've got learning capabilities, but folks feel very involved.
Mm-hmm. I'm very curious about inclusion for remote team members, because it's very clear how I think for a lot of us how to run or right now we're all learning, right? But how to run a company that is in one office, various offices, or there are some places that are extremely successful with running fully remote teams, right? GitLab, for example, everybody's remote, so from day one they totally know how to do that. So how do you actually blend both, and how do you mix both, and how do you include various offices but also remote teams, so that everybody feels one team and actually has access to the same information, to the same level of teamness, so to speak, and the same employee experience? How to do that? That's I think very non-trivial.
A lot of it starts at the norms and the commitments that you establish as an organization. So, it could be being mindful of time zones. We've had to think about this when we have, meetings that might work really well for Pacific Standard Time, but Toronto, they're all eating dinner. So, making sure that the times of the meetings are at a time of day that people can attend, and if not, it's recorded. When you're running meetings that are virtual, making sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak, whether it's utilizing the chat, people raising their hands, calling on people individually. Hey, I haven't heard from you, do you have anything that you'd like to add? I think it's really getting into those details about how would this be in person, and how can we make sure that people have the opportunity to still participate, and also allowing for people to know where resources are and how to access them. We recently switched over to Confluence, which has been a game changer, just having an internal wiki where if people have questions or they need to know something but it's late at night or the person that they need is not online, they have somewhere that they can go for that.
And for us, in terms of diversity and inclusion groups, Madhvi, again, our diversity and inclusion director, she had people apply to be ambassadors at offices all across the world, but also different regions too. So, someone can be a Women at Okta ambassador in the Chicago area and really help to plan events around that. We're also very good in terms of volunteering. We've got Okta for Good, and we've got ambassadors who lead those charges too, and we'll get remote folks together in an area to do different types of volunteering and work that way.
Mm. It's wonderful, wonderful to hear, and I think super insightful to our audience as well. And probably there's not one single good like not one single bullet, right, that you actually can utilize here, but it's really a lot of simple tactical but also strategic actions that you can take, and a lot of day-to-day gestures, I think, as well, meaningful gestures, right? How do you so for us, for example, we have a lot of people that are from variety of countries, not Poland, in our Polish office. So out of a team of 100 over there, we have 30 people that are not non-Polish speakers. So we speak English publicly whenever there's somebody around. So also so that it's not a that actually we don't exclude somebody from just hearing the conversations. I'm also like switching gears a little bit to retaining strong engineering teams. We did a study of developer population some time ago, and actually almost 70% of developers that we checked with changed jobs 1 year ago or 2 years ago. So it doesn't seem like as an industry we're very good at retaining engineering teams. It's a very mobile group of people. So how are you approaching that at Okta and Lever, and maybe across even across customers at Lever, if you have any insights from others. So what makes a great workplace for engineering teams? How to retain strong engineering teams?
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. I honestly think so. Lever has been the outlier in terms of companies that I've worked with as far as retention, especially on engineering. It's so impressive. I mean, we've got, I call them OGers, but like people that have been around since the company was launched, essentially. So, anywhere from like 5 to 7 years of tenure, and we've got a handful of those people. And I think a lot of what keeps people, especially on engineering at Lever, is, number one, they have a very high level of impact. We have a pretty lean team. We always have. And so people are able to really early on dive into really meaty projects and be able to own different areas of the stack, maybe that they haven't had experience with or that they wanted to get exposure to. I think that's something that's very motivating to engineers, being able to try new things and grow their skills. We also have a very structured, especially for a company of our size, career pathing. And so a handful of our managers actually moved into management at Lever. A handful of our, tech leads, team leads have moved into that position after being individual contributors. So we, make space for people to grow in their roles. And we clearly outline, what growth looks like and have biannual reviews so that we're checking back on their progress, and also having really easy access to mentorship as well within the team.
Yeah, I would agree. I think having a documented career path is extremely important. And of course, I work with engineering, and of course they have wiki pages for it. Engineering has wiki pages for everything, I think. But so folks know what they need to do in order to move up. Mentors and onboarding. A great coworker of mine is solely in charge of onboarding experienced hires for engineering and for interns. And it's completely documented. This is day 1, this is day 2. Shay, I know you talked about like this is your first 30 days, things that need to happen. They've got a mentor assigned to them who will be with them for 6 months to a year, so that they've got someone they can rely on at all times. I think another thing for us is with our interns, our goal is to convert 80% of our interns to full-time hires, which is fabulous. Our internships are very project driven. So you've got folks who have come in, who have worked, who've shown their abilities, who know the company, love the company. And I think that makes a great transition to a full-time hire that's going to stay.
I love that. I think beyond that too, just throwing in some of the like fun things, I think it's really important for the team to celebrate wins. So whether it's, we have sprint fiestas or celebrations after they finish a sprint, the team regularly goes out to happy hour, or, I mean, not right now, but, they'll indulge me in kind of inviting me sometimes to some of their team offsites, team events. I think it's really important for people to feel like, they like each other as people beyond the work. You're more productive when you have good relationships at work. So I think being able to allow for that too. And whenever it's employer sponsored, that's always a plus too, if there's budget for that.
I think even right now, remote, I mean, I had a remote happy hour with the HR People Business Partners team yesterday. For recruiting, we were supposed to take this week and bring everyone in and do trainings and learnings, and today was supposed to be the award ceremony. You know what? We did it via Slack. So it's tougher now, but I think it's even more important that things are set up so that people can see each other, so people can talk and chat and feel part of the community.
Actually, we have another question about integrating remote team members with your co-located team members. So do for you, do your remote employees ever meet face to face to work, or catch up for their actually work together, or only for or do they meet for alternative activities such as volunteering? How is it for you?
No, for us, one of the big things with engineering, with sales, we have our technical kickoff where all of the technical staff comes in, and they're in town for close to a week, and it's all kinds of learnings, hearing from our president of technology, hearing from different panels. The big thing is, of course, karaoke still, but having that week where they get to see each other, talk to each other, and just even seeing on Slack channels, it was so nice to put a face to a name. So I think things like that are really, really important. Other things, hackathons, twice a year, the experienced engineers do hackathons. So the team will be virtual, the team will be, in person, but groups will be spread across the world.
That's great. For us, I think the biggest noteworthy kind of get together that we had was over the summer. We have our kind of all company offsite retreat, which we call Converge. It happened in July or August. I'm so fuzzy with time now. But we actually flew the majority, I think almost 90% of our new hires from Toronto out to Lake Tahoe for our offsite. It felt like a big family reunion. We actually gathered in this lawn area and we're cheering for everyone as they got off their buses and shuttles as they were coming in. So that felt really great. We had like 3 or 4 days together to just go through, brainstorms, working sessions as teams. As a greater company, we also did a talent show. It was super fun. And we also invite people into the office for, sales kickoff. Everyone comes in to San Francisco for that. And folks that are remote full-time typically come into the office on a quarterly basis, depending on, what's going on. And then we'll have people that, maybe they're working from home, but they choose to co-work that day, and they'll post in one of the channels, hey, I'm going to be at this coffee shop if you want to do co-working, or we'll have get-togethers where, we're on site at a customer, but we're going to spend the half day working at that customer's office. So we have a blend of different things that we do.
Sounds wonderful. We have a question around advice. So what are the important points to share with managers about proceeding to a total remote recruitment process?
Make sure your panel is trained. Please make sure your panel is trained, because I know a lot of times it'll be like, I need, a senior engineer and putting someone in. Not everyone's a good engineer. Or sorry, not everyone's a good interviewer. If you can have your learning and development train, if you can have folks do different classes, have interviewers, please shadow a great interviewer. I think that's important. I think it's also important to have very diverse interview panels. Now, I know that's not specific to remote, but it translates to remote. When someone comes on a Zoom, they should see people that are like them so they know they're going to feel at home.
I think just keeping really consistent communication, because obviously if you're not working in the same office, you can't pop over to me and ask a question about a candidate. So we need to be really on our P's and Q's in terms of, you know, maybe we're meeting, you know, twice a week instead of just once a week. You know, maybe my expectation for that manager is like, hey, things are crazy right now. Like, I'm going to need you to be able to look through our inbound applicants as well. I think being able to kind of help out where needed, and also asking for help and asking questions if there's anything that's unclear. I think it's really easy to kind of assume if you're not, you know, in front of that person, if you're not in real time. So really kind of doubling down on the communication aspect in whatever form or channel that you choose to do that, to make sure that you're working in lockstep with your recruiter.
And disciplined process, be it on in terms of every interviewer being so trained and disciplined, as well as disciplined communication, probably is even more important than ever, right? In the remote work situation and remote hiring situation. We have another question around mentorship and documented career paths. How do you measure whether these programs are successful to you? Because in the majority of companies would have them, but still they would fall under our research finding, meaning that there still is quite a rotation. So how do you measure it for yourselves?
Your talent acquisition partners should be giving you attrition numbers, per groups, per spheres, per managers. That's, I think, a great way, first of all, to see who's successful. If there is an issue, the data isn't going to lie to you. So the other thing would be, I know with most applicant tracking systems, and I'm sure Lever has this, you're going to get net promoter scores in terms of what your interview process looks like. Were people happy with the process? Do they want to continue? So those are two things that are going to be important.
Yeah, I think to Kathy's point, measuring quality of hire. So how many employees have you hired, have you retained a year after they've been brought on board? Some would even argue, you know, longer than a year is ideal. Anything less than that is probably a mishire. And, you know, really looking at, you know, how long does it take somebody to move within roles? You know, how many times is somebody, you know, getting promoted or moving within roles? We have some outliers on, you know, our team where folks have been promoted, you know, 2, 3, 4 times in their time at Lever. And then we've got some folks that, you know, maybe the role that they are in has a lot of room for growth, so their title has not changed, but their leveling has. So really looking into that, and I think a lot of it is going to be on the manager and working with, you know, their org leader, their executive leader, to look at how has their team changed over time, and if their team is not changing or if their team is attriting, then looking at those reasons.
Thank you. And let's switch gears to how do you imagine the world post COVID-19 to look like? So I know that we're still in the early days of the slope of cases going up, and we're all today concentrated on making sure that our teams, our families, our communities are healthy and safe. But it's very possible that the world, that once we are on the other side of this wave, the world will be a different world. So what do you predict that world will look like? What will change? What is there anything good that is happening in this tragedy that you think will carry over to the next chapter?
I'm an optimist, so I'm definitely leaning right now on like what can I control, what good has come out of this. I know we kind of talked about like the community aspect a little bit before this call, but I'm definitely seeing a lot, especially too within recruiting. I mean, we are all being affected by this. Probably some could argue, are on the front lines of all of these changes, and I've really seen an outpouring of support from my fellow recruiters, sourcers, talent acquisition leads in terms of, oh, what do you need support with? How can I help you? Let's leverage each other and kind of pool our resources. I think we'll continue to see a lot of that as we go forward. I think, as somebody that's very passionate about remote work in general, it is really cool to see a lot of companies embrace remote work really quickly into this transition. I think those that haven't or those that are struggling will fall behind. So I think that that's something that we'll start to see is companies that aren't able to kind of manage for that, either distributed or fully remote workforce, will see a shift internally in kind of how things work. And I think also kind of doubling down on like collaboration tools. I think there's a lot of really cool tools and resources that are continuing to kind of pop up in terms of like time blocking and to-do lists and check-ins and a lot of the project management chat, all of those things. That space is going to continue to grow, and I think people will leverage that more and more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we will go to a dynamic workforce. I think that it's interesting speaking with someone recently whose company did not allow any remote work at all. And then when, the Bay Area said, okay, we are shelter in place, having to, hurriedly set that up, as opposed to companies where it's a matter of practice. You bring your laptop home, maybe there's a budget if you need monitors, but you are able to work anywhere in the world at any time. And I mean, I've been lucky enough in the fact that as a university recruiter, I'm on the road from September through December. So I'm always remote. But just the fact that, it might be, again, you're not hiring engineers just from San Francisco and Bellevue and Toronto, but you're hiring great engineers from North Dakota who don't want to move because of cost of living. So moving to that dynamic workforce, I think, is the future.
And it's exciting. I think it eliminates barriers when you talk about like from a D&I standpoint, like we're going to see a lot of people enter the workforce as a result of remote and distributed work that maybe didn't have access to these opportunities beforehand. So I think it's going to be really fun to see.
And probably what's happening is that we're seeing an acceleration of all those things, right? So it would take us as industry, it would take us way longer to get there, if not for the shock to the system. So it looks like we're adapting positively as well, and we're embracing that change too. We got one more question, a deeper dive into assessing management skills and people management skills, really. So our attendee is very curious, how do you do that remotely? So how do you check whether somebody is able at giving feedback, in running one-on-one meetings, coaching sessions, if you can't see the person like in person, right? And you can't feel their style this way. How do you solve for that in a remote interviewing situation?
We've recently done this for a design manager that we brought on board, but also practice that we utilize on sales as well is we will do essentially like a working collaboration session. So for designers, it's like giving them a prompt of, you're going to build this app, you're working with this other designer, but you're their manager. How would you facilitate this process and kind of working through it? We can adapt that to virtual very easily by just using a virtual whiteboard. Both people are on Zoom kind of talking through it. And for sales, it's more, role plays, like, oh, you have somebody that maybe, for example, I don't know if this is one that we do, but say somebody is on a PIP. How would you talk through, getting an action plan for them? How would you talk through their performance? Asking them very situational based interview questions and seeing how they respond. It's up to your team whether or not you want to give people the prompt beforehand. I think that there's pros and cons to either giving them a heads up or seeing how they think on their feet, but really trying to map back what you're looking to assess for into those real life situations that you would want to test.
And if the area is not in shelter in place, perhaps the senior manager meets with the person for coffee. Again, we can't do that in the Bay Area, but if it's an important enough position, that might be an alternative. You have to remember though, virtual interviews are just as hard on the interviewee as the interviewer, because how do you express your own personality? A lot of times too, there's the delay, you're talking, someone's talking, how do you pause, how do you make sure? So giving people the benefit of the doubt on that too.
Thank you for bringing that point. Absolutely. And also, how do you? It's even more on the interviewees, right? How do they build trust with their future employers? It's a huge decision, probably even a bigger decision for the individual than it would be for the company to hire that person, right? So if somebody is saying yes to us as an as a future employee, right? Like how do they assess their employers as well, and how do they make sure that this is the place that they want to work at? I think it's an excellent point. Like it totally shifts the perspective, and I think often so we don't think about it this way.
And just remember, interviewees, interviewers, you're on your best behavior. It's as much as you hope you're getting a great hire. We all have stories of someone we thought was perfection and wonderful and turned out, hopefully not to be a nightmare. Or maybe one person just had a gut feeling there was a red flag, but nobody brought it up. And then, you do the best job you can. And especially now, as we continue to do this virtually, we learn from each experience.
Yeah, how do you balance not biasing the process, but also getting enough signal that you feel like you're making a good assessment? I am an advocate for always checking references. The few times that I haven't in past companies, that's always the one that you thought, oh man, I should have asked more questions. But ultimately, it is going to be a gamble. You make the best educated decision that you can for the most qualified applicant at the time, but it's always going to be a question until they get into the role and get started.
So it's an approximation of what we think the person will be in their role, right? So the more we can simulate the job, the stronger the signal, but we can't simulate the fullness of the job ever in the recruitment process. So we're only getting close to that.
And also making sure that you're not asking them for free work. Because I think that there's some interview processes where, yes, we want to map this back to the project or thing that they'd be working on, but if it's too close to the actual role, it does border on free work, and we don't want to get onto that.
Absolutely. I think we can take the last question. So the question is around your benefits programs and how. So what benefits do you have at Okta? What benefits do you have at Lever? And how do you think it impacts your retention of your teammates?
I consider myself an owner of Okta. Most of us, and especially with the way the stock market's been going, are checking every day. But for me, that is really important because the company's performance is dependent on me, and I'm dependent on the company's performance. So that's a big part. We have flexible time off in this time right now of COVID-19. We've got a special task force that any of us, if we're ill, if we have a family member that's ill, we can turn to. We've had a lot of virtual meetings in terms of healthcare, emotional care, mental care for all of us. So those are the biggest things. When we're in the office, the free food is nice. Lunches, workout space, massages, those are definitely, first world problems for software companies in the Bay Area. But biggest for me is I feel like I own Okta.
Yeah, for us, we have pretty comprehensive benefits and perks. Probably not quite at the glamorous level of Okta, but I think very competitive for a company of our size and stage. So medical, dental, vision, which is company sponsored. We have a 401k. Because we are still a startup, we offer equity options. So that is dependent on, you know, the role, seniority, things like that. Flexible time off. We also have really generous leave policies in terms of like disability, parental leave, and had recently adjusted our parental leave to be way more inclusive and comprehensive to like all different types of family arrangements and you know, parental units. And I think in terms of turnover, it's generally not related to benefits. I think that we've been very fortunate to be very flexible when it comes to, you know, working from home, when it comes to taking time off. And we really want people to feel like they have what they need, you know, both in and outside of work to be their most productive.
Thank you. So last question from me. What is top of mind for you right now for the coming weeks? And we're wrapping up.
I'll let Shay go first.
Okay, yeah. I'm thinking about it right now because there's so much going on. I think for our team, you know, it's really been a combination of like project work and doing a lot of the things that, you know, we normally don't have as much time to do when we're hiring and scaling really quickly. But also supporting our customers. I think that we're in a place where, you know, people look to Lever for answers in terms of us being in this hiring space. And we've got a lot of customers, especially on the SMB side, where maybe it's a first-time recruiter, maybe it's a company that's never navigated, you know, continuing to operate in a time of economic downturn. So we've actually been doing like weekly roundtables for our customers. So we have, you know, different talent leaders, recruiters from our team just offering support of like, oh, you know, have you paused hiring? Okay, here's some things that we're working on. Or maybe you are still hiring, you know, how can you message candidates in an empathetic way despite what's going on? So I think a lot of it is like both project work and then also, you know, kind of support for existing customers and internal teams as well.
And for me, I've got all my interns starting, and I just want to make sure that they have a great summer where they want to come back and work with us. So how do we do that? And I know it's a big area of topic, you know, for, again, different university recruiters. I've got, I think, 2 or 3 seminars tomorrow, and just working with learning and development on how we get that in place so they feel supported, they feel loved, they feel productive, they feel like they want to be at Okta.
So best of luck for all this that is ahead of you in the coming weeks. Thank you again so much for sharing all your insights and practices and wisdom and experience with our attendees today. And that's it from the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.